So, about a year ago, my next door neighbor got a new puppy. Her name is Pilot, and she's absolutely the cutest dog. They have these black iron fence around the perimeter of their yard, and she's always hanging out in the yard, and she would run up to people that passes by and stick her head through the bars of the fence post and greet people and be petted on her head. I don't have a dog myself, so I asked my neighbor if it's okay to bring her a treat, up to one treat a day. And they were totally fine with it. She's extra happy to see me. Now, a year later, she's over that super excited puppy face. She doesn't run up to every passerby to greet them anymore, but she always greets me. In fact, if she ever hears my front door slam shut, she will like whip her head around to see if it's me. If I come out the door, she will like run up to the fence. I've successfully conditioned her for her Pavlovian response. It makes me so happy every day to be able to pet her and be greeted by her so enthusiastically. It really makes my day. What I'll focus on today is the topic of connecting with ourselves. Being connected to what really brings us joy as opposed to what we're socialized to want. Even a small thing like feeding the neighbor's dog can make a difference in our lives. On the flip side, I notice this pattern during my interviews that when people give examples of the most disconnecting period in their lives, and it often coincides with when they feel disconnected with themselves. Whether it's a period in college, they didn't know who they are, so that they didn't want to reach out and connect with other people, or it's later during their life, there's a period they have career issues and they're just really confused about what they want in life, and they feel more disconnected with their colleagues and people around them. Feeling disconnected with ourselves really impacts our ability to connect with others. And there's a whole host of reasons why that's the case. And I'll just point out two of them. Number one is when we're disconnected with ourselves, we feel less confident. It's harder to explain ourselves to others. So oftentimes we rather just decide to self-isolate and not reach out because there's that awkwardness or sense of discomfort when we have to project who we really are. The second reason is when we're disconnected from ourselves, it's really hard to be high energy. Last time I talked all about energy and how that affects our connections, how putting energy into the situation when we're connecting with others is really helpful. But when we're feeling low energy ourselves, during those situations, it's much harder to connect with other people because we may not have the energy to go on a venture. It may take more energy to pay attention to other people when we're preoccupied with the things that are not going right in our own lives. It's much harder to establish that sense of connection. If you have old connections already, it may not affect things that much. But if you're trying to make new connections, when you're in a low energy state, it makes it extra hard. So in this episode, I want to introduce you to an exercise that really gets to the essence of who you really are and what really moves you. And this is something I'm taking from my career coaching toolkit. It's one of my favorite exercises. I call this exercise the 7 sub-personality exercise. And the idea is rather than think of yourself as like a monolithic individual, think of yourself as a cast of characters, as 7 sub-personalities. Because I'm sure you've experienced this when you have a big decision to make. You're like, well, part of me want this, but then part of me want this. And there's some kind of internal conflict. And oftentimes it's these very strong sub-personalities that desire things that may not all line up. And when you can articulate who these sub-personalities are, it can be very illuminating. I think I'll just start with a personal example to illustrate it, and then I think it'll become a lot more clear. So here are my 7 subpersonalities. The first one is the student. The students love learning, constant mental stimulation, and is very growth oriented. I went to college and then spent another 7 years in grad school because I like learning. And then the second one is the go-getter. That's the action-oriented kind of type A achiever that just want to get things done, efficient, effective. And then the third subpersonality is the connector. Always seeking a deep sense of connection, wants to help other people feel connected, and also mentally want to connect one concept with another. And here I am doing a podcast on connecting. When you're thinking about these names, you might be wondering now, well, where do they come from? You actually come up with them on your own. What are your 7 subpersonalities? You just come up with them and name them. And the place to start is to think back to your childhood. And before you were told what you should care about, what did you do as a kid? Did you play with blocks? Did you like Monopoly? Did you like board games, card games? Did you like pretend games? Did you want to play with friends? Did you like playing alone? They have some clues as to the things that you naturally enjoy doing when you're left to your own devices. So look to your childhood, think about the things you enjoyed then. You might be able to come up with a name or two there. For example, another one of my 7 subpersonality is the artist. Strong sense of aesthetics, whether it's interior design, fashion, or even with my work in coaching, I come up with frameworks and then there's sense of beauty involved. One of the clues that you're happening upon a really good subpersonality is that it's coming out everywhere, like your personal life, your professional life, how you enjoy relaxing, sort of across the board. It's oftentimes not isolated to one area of your life. My artist sort of want to come out like everywhere. And the connector as well. I worked for a number of years in recruiting. That's when I'm connecting people to jobs. And later on, when I became a career coach, there's still that component of mapping people's career preferences to their personality and making that connection or helping people make that connection. I'm also a compulsive matchmaker to the point that if I ever invite a single friend over, she'll ask me, are you trying to set me up with somebody? If I ask someone over for dinner. So if you come up with a name that feels right, it oftentimes will come out in different areas of your life. Also, it comes out throughout time. Like it may exhibit itself as early as childhood, and then it's still something you currently do very recently. So that's another characteristic when you hit upon a good one. Okay, so number 5 is the free spirit. There's part of me that's very carefree, that enjoys adventures, likes mischief. Number 6 is the Roman. The Roman enjoys sensory indulgences, food, wine, and dance. Now, there's a bit of a conflict between the Roman and the go-getter, because the go-getter just want to get things done, work hard, just want to push everything aside, whereas the Roman really want to take time and indulge. And I picture this person in this white toga laying on the chaise lounge eating grapes. And sometimes what happens when you have 2 conflicting subpersonalities, if one of them become too dominant, the other one can start sabotaging you without your knowing. I remember in grad school, I think the dominant personalities were the student and the go-getter, learning and achieving. So together, these 2 personalities just run the show. Everybody else was sort of kicked to the curb. The Roman didn't get much time to indulge. The artist didn't get to do paintings. The student and the go-getter just run the show. But what happens when a really important key aspect of your personality is not expressed for a long time is that they start like sabotaging you from what you're doing. If you ever find yourself procrastinating really dangerously by watching Netflix, even when you have a big presentation coming, it could be a symptom of that. So that's what happens when you don't have them brought to the surface and work with them together. But if you realize that, oh, one of my subpersonalities is a go-getter, the other one is the Roman, then you might be able to structure situations that sort of give both of them some say and some expression so that they don't work in conflict with one another. Another example of a conflict is someone that tried this exercise has a competitive bastard as one of his subpersonalities, and then also a Care Bear. But he's able to separate the domains where the competitive bastard comes out. And then with family, he's, can be a Care Bear. So there's ways to negotiate and have all of your subpersonality be realized. Finally, my number 7 is the positive force. Just a strong focus on positivity, doing good, and helping. I guess this podcast can be a combination of the connector and the positive force working together to make it happen. Also the student, because I had to do some research, and a lot of the reason why I'm doing this podcast is out of my own curiosity to learn about this area. So I guess it's the student, connector, and the positive force that is behind this podcast. I guess I'm just trying to illustrate that if you think about the major things that you embark on, oftentimes you can find some combo of your subpersonalities, especially if it's something that you really enjoy. Sometimes it could be a combo of 2 or 3 things or 4 things even that's at work. The more of your subpersonality that you can incorporate and sort of give expression to, the more fun, fulfilling, energized you will feel. Now, as a career coach, I would say the student is happy because I'm constantly learning new methodologies. The go-getter is happy. The connector is very happy because I get to deeply connect with people. The free spirit, well, I don't think coaching is necessarily that free-spirited, but it does facilitate that free-spiritedness in the sense that when I work in a corporate environment, it just always feels very buttoned up and uncomfortable. I don't want to be so serious all the time. But being serious and looking legit, acting legit is what it's rewarded. But it's not like what I really enjoy. At least being a career coach doesn't push me to act so serious all the time. The Roman doesn't get that much expression, but I can have time to do that outside of what I do. The artist, occasionally, when I have a design task. The positive force, absolutely, because it's very focused on doing good and positive and helping. So as you can see, the more we're able to involve our true subpersonalities, the more satisfying a job is. By the same token, you can think about relationships and your life in general, how much of you is being expressed in your life currently. If you have a job that's only expressing part of who you are, and I'm not saying that you have to quit it and find something else, it's really just suggesting that you want to make sure the other ones are being expressed in your free time, or maybe find ways at work that you could bring them out more. If you find yourself wondering why 7 subpersonalities and not 3 or 20, well, there's really no scientific reason why the number is 7. But all I want to say is that if it's too few, it may not express sort of the richness that is you. But if you have too many, you can't even keep track of them, and they stop being as useful in the decision-making process. So 7 is really the sweet spot. So try to limit yourself to 7 and see what you find. And a couple other tips when you're coming up with these names. One is that you want these subpersonalities to be as orthogonal from one another as possible. For example, my artist is very distinct from the connector, right? But if you find yourself with a teacher and a mentor, then they might be too close. So yeah, you want them to be very like orthogonal and distinct. And later on, you can combine several of them to explain something you're doing. They're just more powerful when they're very distinct. Okay, another tip is that you want to come up with names that really fit, that really feels right. For example, my Roman, in my first iteration of this exercise, I came up with a name, the hedonist. But as I sat on it, it just didn't feel right. It has too much of a negative connotation, the hedonist. And when I came up with the name Roman, it just really made sense. I mean, Rome is my favorite city in the world, and I can just see that picture of a person wearing robe and the chaise lounge eating grapes. It just feels right. So come up with names that feel as right and specific as possible, such that when you say it out loud, you should feel a sense of rightness. An example is, I bet half of you, if you do this exercise, will have the name problem solver on your list. And if you do, and I'm not saying you should change it, but if you do, you may want to think about, is there another word that expresses you even better? Maybe it's the strategist, maybe it's the mastermind, or the chess champion, maybe it's the MacGyver or the fixer, right? So just come up with a 7 at first, do one go around, and then over time, you might put some effort into refining them so that when you say it out loud, it just feels so right. Then you know, like, I got the right ones. When you come up with your 7 subpersonalities, it can give you a lot of good guidance toward finding fulfillment and what makes you truly happy. And that's not to say you can't, if there's something you really want in life, that you have to forego a few of them at any particular time, it's okay to do that. But just remember not to table many of them for too long, because if you do, they may come back to bite you. And then your energy may oscillate. You may have high energy and then low energy, because some of them will start sabotaging you and your efforts. What this exercise is doing is we're doing some good detective work to figure out what really make us feel joy and feel fulfilled. On a day-to-day basis, you may want to just notice the little things that you get the urge to do, like me wanting to feed my neighbor's dog. Now, there is a little barrier to actually making it happen, because, when I first thought of it, I'm like, that's weird. If I ask them, maybe they will be offended. And so there's definitely a little bit of a barrier to making it a reality. But then I thought, well, let me just gently ask them and see how they react, right? I won't push it at all, because, it is their dog, right? So when I brought it up, they were extremely receptive. I saw no problem at all. And now, as a result of noticing that little spark of desire and then really acting on it, I get this daily burst of joy. I know it may sound like a little thing, but when we pay attention to what truly moves us on a daily basis, these little things add up. And not only that, if you haven't been in the habit of doing that, once you do one of them, it gives you a burst of joy and fulfillment and satisfaction. It further motivates you on the path to do more of them. And then soon enough is you start a chain reaction, and that can lead to a much bigger difference. So whether it's noticing the little things or take inventory of the big picture by doing the 7 subpersonality exercise, I hope that you will really start paying attention to your own energy, to what really make you feel connected, and to act on it. One of the barriers that I often see in people is that when they try to take care of themselves or act on a silly impulse like feeding neighbor's dog, they will feel some sense of selfishness or self-indulgence, and they don't act on it because of that. I think caring for ourselves is just so important to make sure that we have a lot of energy to give to ourselves and to those around us. And in fact, I've never met anyone that, I'll look at them and say, oh, I think that person take too good care of themselves. Like, I've never met anyone like that. And then you can ask yourself, like, do you know anyone that take too good care of themselves? I mean, I would venture to say you won't come up with more than you can count on one hand. The vast majority of our friends and neighbors don't really have enough time to care for themselves. So yeah, so don't let any like guilt or feeling of selfishness prevent you from taking good care of yourself. And I hope you had fun doing this exercise. Before we wrap up today, I want to credit this exercise to Steve Pavlina. I read it on a blog post written by him many years ago. And since then, this exercise has helped many people, including myself. So just want to give him a shout out. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.